Thank you. Before I start, we're about to start a very exciting panel. I'd say the most exciting panel of the day. There are loads of people at the back, and I want to encourage you to come forward because I'm feeling rather lonely with so many empty seats over here. So please come forward. Or not. Okay. So we have here some powerhouses in corporate innovation. We are living in a very interesting world. There is much disruption. For the consumer, for the startup, for the technologist, for the futurists, you could say we've never lived in more exciting times. But for the corporate giants, you could say now is a threat, now is a challenge. Or perhaps you could say we now have opportunities. As Nimrod said, I'm Chief Investment Officer of Marks. We're an investment fund investing primarily in enterprise technologies. And to this end, we have partnered with a host of different corporates to assess, invest, and scale early-stage businesses. Our partners include the likes of BMW, Capital One, John Lewis, British Airways, etc. And now, I want to introduce the panelists. Now, we have here today real rock stars when it comes to corporate innovation. And actually, each of you can introduce yourselves, explain what you do. In fact, in the words of Cilla Black, where you're from and where do you come from. So, Mike, kick off.
Yeah, I'm Mike Hodgson from BT. My background is I was with BT for a number of years. I left BT, did a startup for 3 years, came back into BT to go out to Silicon Valley. That's where I really cut my teeth looking for innovation. Came back to the UK in 2005 and picked up this little program called the Israeli Innovation Program, which meant building a capability to go and look for innovation in Israel and bring it back into BT. So that's pretty much what I do. Been out to Israel probably about 40, 50 times. Always amazed by what's out there. And I used that word Israel already, and I promised I wouldn't do that. But and the idea is just to look at all the startups that are out there, all the innovation that's out there, filter it, bring it back into the business for things that we can either sell or we can use ourselves to improve customer experience or our own operational efficiency. So that's pretty much what I do.
Hi, I'm Saul Klein. I've been involved in the tech industry for 23 years now, half my life. And I've been an entrepreneur, an investor, and an operator in the UK, in Israel, in the US. I've mainly been on the side of startup innovation, where startups are either creating businesses that can challenge large companies, or probably the best example of which was being part of the team at Skype prior to our sale to eBay, which tried to take on the likes of BT and Vodafone and others. And then as a partner at Index over the last 8 years, invested in a lot of companies in various sectors, food, finance, fashion, etc. So, you know, have a particular fascination both on the, as Daniel said, the opportunities that innovation creates for big companies. Just to sort of give any Israeli companies in the room a sense, the FTSE 100 in the UK spends $60 billion a year on IT. So I know Tal, who was on another panel, said you can try and craft Israeli companies can craft a UK story. If $60 billion of IT spend isn't a reason to come and sell to UK corporates, I don't know what is. And they're in every sector. So, you know, the UK is a great place for technology. Let's see how the FTSE innovates. And these guys are clearly at the leading edge. So I'm looking forward to hear what they've got to say as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Paul Wilkinson. I look after technology research at Tesco Labs, obviously working for a retailer. I normally describe my job as looking for new technology that can make life easier for customers or for colleagues. So we do a mixture of stuff, some of it customer focused, and at the moment the connected home and a lot of the IoT stuff is very interesting. We're doing a lot of experiments in that space. And then for colleagues, really what we're talking about here is efficiency, how we run our estate, doing a lot of work in robotics and a lot of image recognition stuff in that sort of space at the moment as well. So split quite evenly across the customer-facing stuff and the more sort of business operations stuff. The only other thing I was going to say is about 70% of the projects we work on in labs, we work on with a partner of some sort. That's often a startup, whether they're from the US, London, or Israel. That seems to be the geographies that we work with at the moment. But we'll keep it short.
Okay, my name is Henry. I'm, me and Mike tried to hook up before. And so my background is in technology. My background is electro-optics. So my background is in physics. Can't code for shit, so just if anyone is interested. In the last 5 years, I've been mostly working on corporate innovation, mostly IoT and fintech. For the last 2 years, I've helped El Al Israel Airlines establish a venture arm. And so our main goal for the company, it's a standalone company, which is, in my view, the best way to do it. And so we pretty much seek out, facilitate, invest in technologies that might have a meaningful impact on the industry as a whole. And the main differentiator is that we try and be very, very involved for the first 2 years. So it's not like a pie-in-the-sky type corporate venture. We pretty much tackle anything in that space. So that could be anything from IoT to utilizing data to cybersecurity, pretty much all across the board. We've done so far roughly 5 investments. We're gonna finish another 5 by the end of the year. And also another thing we do differently is that because let's say we're first movers, there's not a lot of these type of entities in our space. Well, you mentioned British Airways. Recently, they launched also with you guys the hangar. So we've been around for about 1.5 years. We're doing things slightly different. And so we've also managed to build this ecosystem of early adopters. So we have a micro fund together with JetBlue Technology Ventures. We have a meaningful partnerships with the guys at Lufthansa, at Air France, with a few of the airline manufacturers. There's not a lot of those, so it's relatively easy to accomplish. And we're growing this ecosystem of early adopters to really make an impact in an industry that is very, very conservative and pretty much hasn't evolved on a technological side in the last few decades, even though flying is probably the oldest human dream and is considered very technological. The industry of commercial aviation has not been such. I'll keep it.
Johnny Combe. I work for BMW for our financial services part of the business, and I lead our digital and innovation programs. So I guess as an organization, we're very well known for innovation within our cars, within our physical products. And so really part of what I want to do is bring that kind of ethos and mindset of innovation to our financial services business. So as part of that, we partner with L Marks, and we've just embarked on our first accelerator this year, which we're in week 6 of 10 at the moment. And yeah, so we're very much kind of on that journey, but not there.
Cool. Hi, my name's Chris Owen. Work at Capital One. I'm that guy with chinos and a hoodie that joins the corporate that we introduced earlier. Spent a bunch of time designing, running innovation programs for UKTI, people like Jaguar Land Rover at MOD. Joined Capital One 2 years ago. I run our technology products for operations and our lab and accelerator. So there you go.
Thanks. Okay, so just picking up something which Saul mentioned briefly, you do have these young startups like Skype trying to defeat the big players like BT. There's a great line from Mike Tyson where everyone's got a plan until they get hit in the face. And you'll have this with corporates, so they've got their plan, etc. But then there'll be that young startup, the Amazons or whoever, who are suddenly going to perhaps displace your standing. So what would you say are the key factors in a corporate remaining innovative?
I guess I'm a big believer in playing to your strengths. So in our case, I think we recognise that as a large corporate, there are some real strengths. We've got a brand that's hugely recognisable, very valuable in the market. We've got an existing consumer base. We've got the ability to scale nationally and globally, and we've got the ability to fund and accelerate things when we see something that we really like. So for me, a successful innovation program means that you need to play to your strengths. Now, clearly, as a large corporate, there are some things that we're not good at, and they're probably the same things that every large corporate here today talks about: the legacy systems, the slowness to change, all these kind of things. And yes, those are things which can hamstring us, but I guess that's where we've found that our partnership with startups can be really effective. So I'm a firm believer in playing to your strengths and recognizing that there are actually some things that large corporates can do very well, which startups maybe can't.
I think I would agree with that entirely. I think, though, there are two. One is a sort of a precondition, and the other is really hard to do. The first precondition, I think, for successful corporate innovation is that the CEO of the company is fully behind any kind of innovation agenda, and that it's not seen as a CSR project, it's not seen as R&D, but it's actually core to the business. And I think more organizations have R&D and innovation divisions than have CEOs who would put their head on the line for those divisions. So I think that's always critical. And then I think the second thing, which is incredibly hard to do, is to set up a process by which small companies and startups can easily become suppliers. So the UK government has created a mechanism by which at least 25% of IT and government procurement is tendered online to SMEs and to startups. So you can go onto the government website, any tender that is over £10,000 is openly available to startups. And I think it would be indicative of how seriously the FTSE 100 take this issue if we started seeing more big companies follow the government's lead in this area, because when the government is leading in innovation, you know it's time to ask questions.
Just to add to that, I think that in terms of how corporates stay ahead, I think leadership plays a massive role, not just at the sort of exec level. Leaders are paid to think, and I think a great part of being an innovation leader in a corporate is actually being brave enough to step out of the day-to-day, the operational running of an organization that has huge pressures on KPIs and metrics and that kind of stuff, and being brave enough to step out of it and think, where am I going? What's my purpose? How do I free up my teams to be autonomous, to crack on and do things, and invest in the talent so that they're able to do it? And when you see that, it works really well, and the folks that fail often weren't brave enough to do it.
Just the model that we've sort of built up over the years, I guess, is to be allowed to do some stuff and to try things. And the things that become successful are the things that you try and then are successful, not just the things that you just sell from a PowerPoint slide. We've never had anything become a massive success from the back of a PowerPoint slide. We've had things become the back of a success from a small trial, because a lot of people in the corporate world often struggle with their imagination a little bit, and for all that you can have the CEO's sort of general backing, it's not until he sees some good hard data on how well something's gone at a small scale that he'll really put his weight behind something and say, right, we're going to make this a really big, important part of the business. So just testing things but being in an environment where you're allowed to test things is just really important, and where they're allowed to fail, where you don't have necessarily that KPI that says, every year 90% of your projects must be a massive success. Without that pressure, otherwise you'd just be doing the mediocre things. You'd not be shooting for the stars.
Yeah, just following up on a point that Saul made, it's about culture, and that is driven top down. We are blessed with a CEO that backs us to the hilt. He funds 250 people in BT whose job it is to do innovation. He regularly goes out to Silicon Valley. All his direct reports quake when he does that because they know he's going to come back with a load of ideas that he wants implementing. He's been out to Israel. And the other part to that answer is, you know, we absolutely embrace startups. You know, we've realized a long time ago in BT, we do have a large research organization that generates a lot of IP, but we've realized, you know, we look outside. 80% of our innovation must come from outside with startups. So that's the role that I have. So, you know, absolutely embrace that. Work with the startups, help them, do the testing that Paul said there, you know, do some of those pilots with them and work on that together. The other thing that makes it very successful for us is working with customers. So get that innovation, and it's part of that testing and validation. Get that innovation in front of customers as soon as possible. We were an organization 15 years ago where we used to squirrel away in a lab somewhere and then come to the market with a great new product. You know, we've worked on it for 2 years, and then the market would say, well, that's very, very nice. It looks lovely, but we would never buy that. It's no use to us. And we learned very early on that the best way is to engage those customers early. And if you look at all the successes that we have, that my team has, it's where we've worked with the likes of Tesco and others to actually jointly validate an idea, test it in the marketplace, and prove that there's a real opportunity out there. And that's how we have success.
Want me to add one last sentence? Okay. I'm going to say something about the leadership endorsement. First of all, that's obviously key. I'm not going to repeat. Everyone said that, and it's obviously true. I'm going to add another layer to it. So for us, it was also a matter of, okay, so there's not a lot of airlines or aviation companies in general, let's say go back 2 years, who are doing open innovation in any kind of model, not a lot anyway. And so for us, we had leadership support from day one, from the CEO, board of directors, even a majority of ownerships. We had a lot of support, but also it was about, you know, building the right set of expectations, because a lot of these guys, they don't come from a tech, let's say, world, essentially. And so they might think that they don't really understand maybe the amount of work and risk involved in really making something happen. And so it was also about, and this takes time. It's not like one conversation. It takes years to really build that set of expectations for them to really judge the right KPIs and how we're actually moving forward. We were able to do that so far relatively well, and so we actually came across a startup that recently was launched with us, started to invested in about a year ago, and we just launched their product now because it was a heavy technological integration. And just launching them was a big risk to the way let's say, current agreements that are pretty limiting the airlines in how they work with other stakeholders in this industry. So the CEO had to make a decision if he's going to launch this and take a risk, or he's going to say, no, we have this, we're confined in this thing, we can't do it. And because we've built this relationship for a lot of time, we managed to get his approval, and the product is now launched, and people are using it, and customers are using it, and it's generating revenues. We got to the point where the CEO of the company, of El Al, for example, he's not a board member at Cockpit, but he attends every meeting. He comes to all the meetings 4 times a year, spends as much time as needed to really make this happen. And I think without that kind of support, especially for a very conservative company that is very top-down oriented, it's crucial.
Thank you. I think all your different answers leads us quite well into the Kälkkalist challenge question. This is a question that's been set by Kälkkalist. So, what would be a better strategy for a big corporation? Counting on its own innovation capacity or acquiring startup companies? Who wants to take that?
Well, I mean, my first question is, why do you need to acquire startup companies? Why not just work with them? And that's what we do. I mean, we have the big innovation function, but there's no reason why we need to acquire. In fact, I'm not a big fan of acquiring companies, because I think large corporates can steer a very successful startup down a false path. I like startups that have got lots of customers, even if they're our competitors.
Perhaps, Saul, what's your opinion on that? Especially following on with what Mike was saying, perhaps companies like Skype?
at Index, one of my partners was a guy called Mike Volpe, who created the sort of the initial M&A group at Cisco, where they, I think under his stewardship, did 75 acquisitions. And one of the things I learned from him, which I think is correct, is that you kind of have to think about M&A a similar way to how you would think about venture investing, or quite frankly, how you would think about project management, is that you're going to get it wrong more times than you're going to get it right. And, you know, I think it's really true that innovation or risk-taking is more likely to fail than it is to succeed. And if you don't have the permission and you don't have the mentality to do that, you're going to fail whatever you're doing. And what Mike would say is that, you know, of the 75 deals that they did at Cisco, they massively overpaid probably for 80% of them, but they massively underpaid for 5% of them. And you could buy a company, say, for $20, $30 million that may end up generating a new line of business that then ran into the billions. But equally, you could acquire a company for 2 or 3 billion that you had to write off 2 years later. And if you're not prepared to take that diversity of risk, if you're organizationally not set up to experiment across M&A, investments, and innovation, I think you're going to fail in any of those 3 areas. So personally, I don't see M&A as being distinct from the other areas. It's just a sort of another tool for how you can go about this.
Yeah, I guess I would kind of take the politicians' route and say it doesn't need to be one or other, and I'll explain why I'd say that. Working with startups, I think, has got its place in your innovation portfolio. They will see things in a way that large corporates don't see things. There will probably be a diversity of thought that's maybe not there within large corporates, and those things can be hugely beneficial to the partnership. However, within your own organization, there are a whole load of people who understand your corporate immune system better than anyone else, and certainly better than a startup will. So I really think you need both, and successful programs need both.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to skip to one more question because we are running out of time, and it's a bit of a challenging question. Innovation is quite sexy. You get to wear your hoodie in the office, you get to do a bit things which are a bit out of the ordinary. And it's all well and good when profits are well, you know, economy's strong, there's no strange presidents in power. But when things do hit the fan, why won't they just cut this innovation strategy?
Well, I think I can talk about this from a company who's just come through, you know, 2 or 3 years of quite hard times when, you know, we didn't get rid of the innovation team. You know, Tesco Labs wasn't the first thing to be cut. It was protected by some of our main sort of important stakeholders because they understood the need to think a bit more long-term, not just to pander to the city in terms of the next 6 months. And if they'd have got rid of us, they'd have got rid of a big sort of pipeline of possibility. And I think, well, the one thing that we always talk, we spend a disproportionate amount of time internally talking about what we do and what we've done and the impact we've had, almost to protect ourselves in some ways, but we kind of still work on the principle that if once a year we do something that ends up being game-changing, then no one really questions our existence too much. And I think that protected us through that time. You know, people have seen the success we've had.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you've got a kind of innovation unit or anything like that, it's going to get closed down, is my sort of honest view of it. It's, you know, close it down, call it success is how it tends to go. And so it's always, how can you get folks in delivery roles to be innovators, to be creative? And that's what you'd always look to do, is that all the teams we work with, it's the guys in the job, day-to-day delivery, who are the innovators. It's part of their job, it's in their targets, it's in their objectives. Folks that innovate will be measured on performance curves and do better. And ultimately, you integrate it to the DNA of the company, and it's going to work.
I think that's a great way to end the panel. So thank you very much. Just one final thought to the corporates. If your strategy is to target the millennials, you are already too late. Thank you.